A 4-year-old boy steps onto a sunlit trail, his tiny hand in his mother's, laughter echoing through the pines. 10 minutes later, he's gone, swallowed by the forest without a sound. What could make a child vanish in broad daylight, leaving no trace? This is the story of Eli Brennan, a mystery that gripped a small town and shattered a family. It starts with a single chilling moment that no one saw coming. The deeper you dig, the more the truth slips away. Hey, don't forget to like. Please subscribe for more shocking crime stories and hit the bell icon. The darkest truth are yet to come. Eli Brennan was a spark of a boy, all wide eyes and boundless energy, the kind of kid who could turn a muddy puddle into an adventure. At 4 years old, he was small for his age but fearless, with a mop of brown curls and a grin that could melt the hardest heart. His mother, Sarah Brennan, was his world. A single parent in her early 30s, Sarah had built a life for them in the quiet town of Forks, Washington, nestled on the edge of the Olympic National Forest. She was a part-time librarian, soft-spoken but fierce when it came to Eli. Their bond was unbreakable, forged through bedtime stories, backyard campfires, and weekend hikes in the woods that surrounded their small cabin. Sarah's love for the outdoors came from her own childhood, raised by parents who taught her to navigate trails and respect the wild. She wanted that for Eli, too. A life where nature wasn't just scenery but a teacher. A home. Forks was a tight-knit community, the kind of place where neighbors waved from porches and kids rode bikes until dusk. But it sat in the shadow of the Olympic National Forest, a sprawling 628,000-acre wilderness of towering cedars, misty valleys, and rugged rivers. The forest was both a playground and a mystery, known for its beauty, but also for stories of hikers who never returned. Sarah, who'd moved there after a painful divorce, found solace in the forest's quiet power. She'd joined a local hiking group, the Olympic Trailblazers, a mix of families, retirees, and outdoor enthusiasts who explored the trails together. The group was like family, and Sarah trusted them with Eli. They'd watched him toddle along paths, giggling as he chased butterflies or pointed at deer tracks. For Sarah, these outings were a chance to give Eli the childhood she'd had, free, wild, and full of wonder. That sense of safety, that trust, made the events of June 14, 2018, all the more unthinkable. It was a warm Saturday morning, the air thick with the scent of cedar and damp earth. The Olympic Trailblazers had planned a short hike to Lake Crescent, a pristine gem in the forest known for its turquoise water and gentle trails, ideal for kids. Sarah packed Eli's little backpack, juice box, granola bar, his favorite dinosaur, Choi, and laced up his tiny hiking boots. The group, about 15 people, gathered at the trailhead, chatting and laughing under the morning sun. Eli was buzzing with excitement, tugging at Sarah's hand, eager to run ahead. The plan was simple: a 2-mile loop, a picnic by the lake, and back before lunch. Nothing felt risky. The trail was well marked, the group experienced, and Lake Crescent was a family-friendly spot. But plans, as Sarah would learn, can unravel in an instant. The hike started like any other. Eli skipped along, his voice high and bright, calling out to birds or pointing at rocks that looked like castles. Sarah stayed close, her eyes rarely leaving him. The group spread out slightly, as groups do, with faster hikers up front and slower ones trailing. Sarah and Eli were in the middle, surrounded by familiar faces. Mark, the group leader, a retired forest ranger, Lisa, a nurse who always carried extra snacks, and Tom, a quiet carpenter who'd lost his own son years ago and doted on Eli like a grandfather. The trail wound through dense forest, sunlight filtering through the canopy, the lake just a mile away. At one point, Eli darted a few steps ahead, chasing a leaf that floated past. Sarah called him back, her voice calm but firm. He giggled, returned to her side, and grabbed her hand. That was the last time she felt his small fingers in hers. No one can pinpoint the exact moment Eli vanished. It was a 10-minute window that would haunt Sarah for years. The group had stopped briefly to admire a view where the trail opened to a clearing, Lake Crescent shimmering in the distance. Eli was right there, tugging at Sarah's sleeve, asking about a bird's nest in a nearby tree. She turned to answer a question from Lisa, her attention split for maybe 20 seconds. When she looked back, Eli was gone. No sound, no cry, no rustle of leaves, just gone. Sarah's first thought was that he'd run ahead, maybe hiding behind a tree for a game. She called his name, her voice sharp but still steady. No answer. The group fanned out, calling for him, their shouts echoing through the trees. The forest, so alive moments ago, felt eerily silent, as if it had swallowed Eli whole. Panic set in fast. Sarah's heart pounded as she pushed through ferns, her eyes scanning every shadow, every bush. The group searched the clearing, the trail, the nearby underbrush. Mark tried to keep everyone calm, suggesting Eli might be nearby, lost in a game. But Sarah knew her son. Eli wasn't a wanderer. He stayed close, especially in unfamiliar places. She screamed his name until her throat burned, her voice cracking under the weight of fear. Tom checked the trail ahead, while Lisa ran back to the trailhead to call for help. Cell service was spotty in the Olympic Forest, but she reached 911. Within an hour, Clallam County Sheriff's deputies and a search and rescue team arrived, their radios crackling in the quiet woods. The search had begun, but so had a nightmare that would consume Forks. The first hours were frantic but organized. Searchers combed the trail, fanning out in grids, calling Eli's name. Volunteers from town joined, their faces grim but determined. Sarah was a wreck, pacing the trailhead, clutching Eli's dinosaur toy, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Had he fallen into a ravine, been stung by something and passed out? The Olympic Forest was vast, with steep cliffs and hidden streams, but Eli was small, his steps short. How far could he have gone? By dusk, helicopters buzzed overhead, their spotlights cutting through the darkening forest. Bloodhounds sniffed Eli's jacket donated by Sarah, but the dog circled aimlessly, picking up no clear scent. That was the first red flag. A child's trail should have been easy to track, especially in soft dirt. But it was as if Eli had never been there. As night fell, the temperature dropped and Sarah's fear turned to dread. Eli was out there, alone, in his thin blue jacket and sneakers. The forest was no playground now. It was a predator, cold and unyielding. The search continued through the night, flashlights bobbing like fireflies, voices hoarse from shouting. Sarah refused to leave even as deputies urged her to rest. "He's my son," she snapped, her eyes wild with desperation. "I'm not going anywhere." By morning, the search had grown, with state police and National Guard units joining in. News vans rolled into Forks, their cameras trained on the trailhead. Reporters swarmed Sarah, asking questions she couldn't answer. What was Eli wearing? Did he have any medical conditions? She wanted to scream at them to help, not talk, but she held it together, her voice trembling as she described her boy to the world. The media frenzy turned Forks into a circus. Satellite trucks lined the main road, and reporters in crisp suits stood in front of the forest, spinning theories. Was it a kidnapping? A bear attack? A tragic accident? The comparisons came fast. JonBenet Ramsey, other cases that had gripped the nation. Sarah hated the spotlight, but she faced the cameras, holding up Eli's photo, begging for anyone with information to come forward. Her plea went viral, shared across social media, but it also brought the cranks. A psychic called, claiming Eli was with the spirits. A man showed up with a drone, insisting he could sense Eli's location. Sarah ignored them, focusing on the search, but the distractions piled up, pulling resources from the real work. Days passed with no sign of Eli. The search expanded, covering miles of forest, divers checking Lake Crescent, climbers scaling rocky cliffs. A hiker reported seeing a small boy near a stream, but it turned out to be another child. A torn piece of blue fabric was found, but it wasn't Eli's jacket. Every lead was a dead end, and Sarah's hope began to fray. She barely slept, surviving on coffee and adrenaline, her face gaunt but her resolve ironclad. The sheriff's office set up a command post, and volunteers poured in, some driving hours from Seattle or Tacoma. But the forest was vast, and Eli was so small. By day 5, the mood had shifted. Searchers whispered about recovery instead of rescue. Sarah overheard and snapped, "He's not dead, he's out there, you don't know him." Then came the scream. A week into the search, a volunteer, a young woman named Emily, froze on a remote section of the trail, about a mile from where Eli vanished. She swore she heard a high-pitched scream, sharp and fleeting, like a child's cry cut short. Others nearby heard it too, but when they rushed toward the sound, they found nothing, no footprints, no broken branches, no trace. The scream became the talk of the search, a chilling clue that raised more questions than answers. Was it Eli? An animal? A trick of the wind? Sarah clung to it, insisting it was her son. But the lack of evidence gnawed at her. The forest seemed to mock them, offering hints but no answers. The scream was a turning point, a moment that made everyone question what they were dealing with. As the search stretched into its second week, cracks appeared in the effort. Volunteers grew tired, their numbers dwindling. The media, once relentless, chased newer stories. Sarah felt the world slipping away, but she refused to let go. She walked the trails herself, calling Eli's name until her voice gave out. She studied maps, retraced the group's steps, questioned every decision made that day. Why hadn't she held his hand tighter? Why had the group spread out? Mark admitted he'd taken his eyes off the kids for a moment, distracted by a map. Lisa confessed she'd been chatting, not watching. Guilt hung heavy. But Sarah didn't blame them. She blamed herself. "I let go of his hand," she whispered to a deputy one night, tears streaming. "I let go." The investigation took a darker turn when suspicion fell on the hiking group. Detectives interviewed every member, digging into their backgrounds. Tom, the carpenter, became a focal point. He'd been unusually quiet since the disappearance, and someone mentioned he'd been near Eli just before he vanished. Tom was devastated by the scrutiny, insisting he loved Eli like family. His alibi checked out. He'd been with Mark when Eli disappeared, but the whispers persisted. Sarah defended him, but doubt crept in. Could someone she trusted have done something unthinkable? The idea was unbearable, but she couldn't dismiss it entirely. The community, once united, fractured under the weight of suspicion. Neighbors stopped talking, and the hiking group disbanded, unable to bear the guilt. By the end of the third week, the official search scaled back. The sheriff's office cited resources and the unlikelihood of finding Eli alive. Sarah was furious, storming into the command post, demanding they keep going. "He's my son," she said, her voice breaking. "You can't give up." But the reality was brutal. The Olympic National Forest was a labyrinth of wilderness, rugged, dense, and unforgiving. A child could disappear forever in its depths. Sarah refused to accept defeat. She organized her own searches, rallying friends and strangers who'd seen her on the news. She plastered forks with posters of Eli's smiling face, his brown curls unmistakable. Every night she sat in his room clutching his dinosaur toy, whispering promises to find him. But the forest held its secrets, and Eli's trail was cold. Months passed, then a year. The case faded from headlines, but not from Sarah's heart. She quit her job at the library, unable to focus on anything but Eli. She became a fixture in Forks, a ghost of a woman handing out flyers, her eyes hollow but determined. She followed every tip, no matter how absurd. A hiker's blurry photo, a camper's vague memory. None panned out. The scream lingered in her mind, a haunting echo she couldn't shake. What had it meant? Had Eli been there, so close, only to slip away again? The questions piled up, each one a weight on her soul. Sarah's life became a mission, not just to find Eli, but to uncover the truth, no matter how painful. In 2020, 2 years after Eli's disappearance, a hiker stumbled across something chilling. Deep in the Olympic forest, miles from the lake, Crescent Trail, they found a child's sneaker, weathered but intact, half buried in a creek bed. It was Eli's, a green Nike with a dinosaur sticker, unmistakable. Sarah's heart leapt. then sank. The sneaker was alone, no other trace nearby. No clothes, no bones, no answers. Forensic teams scoured the area, but the creek had washed away any clues. The discovery was a cruel tease, reigniting hope only to crush it. Sarah held the sneaker, her fingers tracing the faded sticker, and wept. It was proof Eli had been there, but where was he now? The find made national news, pulling Forks back into the spotlight. Theories exploded. Abduction, accident, something stranger. Sarah didn't care about theories. She wanted her son. The sneaker changed everything. It wasn't just a clue. It was a challenge to the official narrative. How had Eli's shoe ended up miles away in a place no 4-year-old could reach alone? The terrain was steep, rocky, treacherous. Even experienced hikers struggled there. Detectives reopened the case, now leaning toward foul play. They re-interviewed the hiking group, pressed harder. Sarah watched, torn between hope and dread. Was someone hiding something? The sneaker suggested Eli hadn't just wandered off, but the lack of other evidence was maddening. No DNA, no fingerprints, just a single shoe in the middle of nowhere. The forest was talking, but its message was cryptic. Sarah felt it in her bones. The truth was out there, buried in the wilderness, waiting to be found. As 2022 approached, 4 years since Eli vanished, Sarah's fight had become a symbol. She spoke at community events, her voice steady but raw, sharing Eli's story to keep it alive. She started a foundation, Eli's Light, to fund searches for missing children and push for better safety protocols in national forests. Her pain had purpose, but it came at a cost. Friends drifted away, unable to handle her intensity. Her health suffered, sleepless nights, skipped meals. Yet she pressed on, driven by a mother's love and a nagging question. What happened that day? The sneaker was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture was still incomplete. Sarah knew the answer was close, closer than ever, but the forest wasn't done with its secrets. The Olympic National Forest had given Sarah Brennan one piece of her son, a single green sneaker with a dinosaur sticker, found miles from where 4-year-old Eli vanished. For 2 years, that shoe was the only whisper from the wilderness, a cruel hint that kept Sarah's hope alive and her heart broken. She clutched it at night, tracing the faded sticker, as if it could lead her to Eli. The discovery in 2020 had reopened the case, shifting suspicions toward foul play, but the forest held its secrets tight. Sarah's fight was no longer just about finding her son. It was about unraveling a truth that felt darker with every passing day. The sneaker was a clue, but it was also a challenge, a taunt from a mystery that refused to be solved. Sarah's life in Forks, Washington had become a vigil. She'd transformed her small cabin into a war room, walls covered with maps, police reports, and photos of Eli's smiling face. Every lead, no matter how small, consumed her. A camper's sighting of a small figure in the forest. A hiker's claim of hearing a child's laugh near a remote ridge. Each tip sent Sarah back into the Olympic forest, trudging through mud and brambles, calling Eli's name. Her foundation, Eli's Light, funded new searches, but the results were always the same: nothing. The sneaker remained the only tangible link to her son, and its impossible location, miles from the Lake Crescent Trail, in terrain too rugged for a child, gnawed at her. How had it gotten there? Who had taken Eli? The questions were a constant, but Sarah refused to let them win. The investigation, now in its 4th year, was a shadow of its former self. Clallam County Sheriff's detectives had re-interviewed the Olympic Trailblazers, the hiking group with Sarah when Eli vanished. Mark, the retired ranger, was cooperative but shaken, admitting he'd been distracted that day. Lisa, the nurse, broke down, blaming herself for not watching closer. Tom, the carpenter who doted on Eli, remained a quiet enigma. His grief seemed genuine, but his silence fueled whispers. Detectives found no evidence against him. His alibi was solid, but Sarah couldn't shake a nagging doubt. The scream, heard a week after Eli's disappearance, that sharp, fleeting cry haunted her most. It was Eli, she was sure, but the forest had swallowed the sound, leaving nothing but questions. Was it a cry for help? A moment of fear? or something else entirely? In early 2022, a new lead emerged, as unexpected as it was chilling. A park ranger patrolling a remote section of the Olympic Forest, near the Solduke River, found a child's backpack caught in a tangle of roots by the water's edge. It was Eli's. Blue, with a dinosaur patch, unmistakable. Sarah's breath caught when deputies showed it to her. The backpack was weathered, its fabric faded but intact, with a granola bar wrapper and a juice box straw inside, just as she'd packed that day in 2018. Forensic teams descended on the site, combing the riverbank for clues. They found nothing else, no clothes, no bones, no signs of Eli. The backpack, like the sneaker, was a solitary relic, raising more questions than answers. How had it traveled so far from the trail? Why was it preserved, untouched by animals or the elements? The discovery reignited the case, pulling Forks back into the national spotlight. The media swarmed again, their cameras and questions relentless. Sarah faced them with a weary strength, holding up the backpack, her voice steady but raw. "This is my son's," she said, her eyes locked on the lens. "Someone knows what happened. Please help me find him." Her plea spread online, hashtags like #find Eli Brennan trending for weeks. But the attention brought chaos too. Armchair detectives flooded forums with theories: human trafficking, a serial predator, even supernatural explanations tied to the forest's eerie reputation. Sarah ignored the noise, focusing on the backpack. It was found 10 miles from the sneaker, in a direction no 4-year-old could have walked. The math didn't add up. Detectives began to suspect the items were placed deliberately, a breadcrumb trail leading nowhere, or somewhere. Sarah's resolve hardened. She hired a private investigator, a grizzled ex-cop named Daniel Holt, who specialized in missing persons cases. Holt was skeptical at first, warning Sarah that cold cases rarely end happily. But her determination won him over. He pored over the case files, retraced the trail, and interviewed locals who'd avoided the police. One name kept surfacing: Caleb Reed, a reclusive handyman who lived on the edge of Forks. Caleb was in his 50s, a loner with a history of petty theft and a reputation for wandering the forest alone. He'd been spotted near Lake Crescent the day Eli vanished, but his name never made it into the original investigation. Holt dug deeper, learning Caleb had a shed in the woods, hidden off a logging road, where he kept tools and, some whispered, secrets. Holt and Sarah visited Caleb's property under the guise of asking about trail conditions. The shed was a ramshackle structure, overgrown with moss, its door padlocked. Caleb was cagey, his eyes darting as he answered their questions. "I don't know nothing about no kid," he said, his voice rough. But Sarah noticed something: a child's toy, a plastic dinosaur, half buried in the dirt near the shed. Her heart stopped. It was identical to the one Eli carried, the one she still held every night. She didn't confront Caleb then, but she told Holt, who alerted the sheriff's office. They secured a warrant, and in April 2022, deputies raided the shed. What they found turned the case upside down. Inside, hidden under a tarp, were items that sent a chill through everyone. A child's jacket, blue like Eli's, folded neatly. A pair of sneakers, not Eli's but eerily similar, with a dinosaur sticker peeling off. A notebook filled with cryptic sketches, maps, trails, and what looked like a child's silhouette. No DNA linked the items directly to Eli, but the jacket matched the description Sarah had given police. Caleb was arrested, charged with evidence tampering, and questioned for days. He claimed he'd found the items while scavenging, insisting he had no connection to Eli. But his story was shaky. He couldn't explain the notebook or why he'd kept the items hidden. Sarah watched the interrogation through a one-way mirror, her hands trembling. Was this the man who'd taken her son? The media exploded, painting Caleb as a monster. Headlines screamed of a breakthrough, but Sarah wasn't convinced. The evidence was compelling but circumstantial. Where was Eli? If Caleb had taken him, where was he now? The backpack and sneaker suggested Eli had been in the forest, but the shed's contents pointed to something deliberate, calculated. Holt pushed for more searches focusing on the area near Caleb's property. Volunteers returned, combing the Salt Duke River Valley, their hope reignited by the new lead. Sarah joined them, her body aching but her spirit unyielding. She couldn't shake the image of the dinosaur toy in the dirt. It was too specific, too personal. The forest was finally speaking, but its words were a puzzle. In July 2022, the break Sarah had prayed for came, but it was more devastating than she'd imagined. A hiker, exploring a ravine near the Salt Duke, found human remains, small fragile bones, partially buried under a fallen log. Forensic teams moved in, their faces grim as they collected the evidence. Sarah was called to the sheriff's office, where a detective slid a report across the table. DNA testing confirmed the remains were Eli's, a 99.9% match. The bones showed no signs of trauma, no fractures, no animal marks. They were found with a shredded piece of fabric, blue, like Eli's jacket, and a single sock, also his. The location was 12 miles from the Lake Crescent Trail, in a ravine so steep it took climbers hours to reach. Sarah collapsed, her sobs echoing in the sterile room. Her boy was gone, but the how and why remained a void. The discovery shattered the case's narrative. Investigators initially leaned toward a tragic accident, Eli wandering off, succumbing to the elements, but the ravine's inaccessibility made that impossible. A 4-year-old couldn't have climbed there alone. The lack of trauma ruled out a bear or cougar attack. Animals would have scattered the bones, left marks. The items, sneaker, backpack, now bones, were found in a pattern, spread across miles, as if placed to be found. Caleb Reed became the prime suspect. His shed, the toy, the jacket, all pointed to him. But his DNA wasn't on the items, and he stuck to his story. He was a scavenger, not a killer. Prosecutors charged him with kidnapping and murder, but without a confession or direct evidence, the case was shaky. Sarah didn't care about convictions. She wanted the truth. Holt kept digging, driven by Sarah's pain. He interviewed a former neighbor of Caleb's, an elderly woman who'd seen him carrying a large duffel bag into the forest days after Eli vanished. She'd thought nothing of it then, but now it was a red flag. Holt theorized Caleb had taken Eli, perhaps in a moment of opportunity, and moved his remains over time, planting the sneaker and backpack to mislead searchers. The scream, he believed, was Eli's last cry, silenced by Caleb in the forest's depths. But why? Caleb had no history of violence, no clear motive. Some speculated he was mentally unstable, obsessed with the forest, seeing Eli as a gift to its wild heart. Others thought it was simpler, a crime of impulse, covered up with meticulous care. The trial began in early 2023, a media storm that dwarfed the initial frenzy. Sarah sat in the courtroom, her face a mask of grief and resolve, as prosecutors laid out their case. The jacket, the toy, the notebook, each item was a piece of a chilling puzzle. Caleb's defense argued he was a loner, not a predator, and the evidence was circumstantial. The jury deliberated for days, the tension suffocating. Sarah spoke outside the courthouse, her voice steady despite her pain. "I don't need a verdict to know my son was taken," she said. "I need to know why." In March 2023, Caleb was convicted of evidence tampering but acquitted of murder due to lack of proof. He was sentenced to 7 years, a hollow victory for Sarah. The truth, she realized, might never come from him. But Sarah found another kind of closure. The remains gave her something to hold on to, a way to say goodbye. She buried Eli's bones in a small cemetery in Forks under a cedar tree, his dinosaur toy placed in the coffin. She visited daily, talking to him, promising he'd never be forgotten. The ravine where he was found became a pilgrimage site for her, a place to reflect on the boy who'd lit up her world. She learned the truth wasn't in Caleb's silence, but in her own strength. Eli's death was no accident. It was a crime, carefully hidden by a man who'd exploited the forest's secrets. The scream, the sneaker, the backpack, they were pieces of a deliberate act, a puzzle Sarah had solved through sheer will. Sarah's fight didn't end with the trial. Eli's light grew, funding safety reforms in national parks, better trail monitoring, stricter group protocols, emergency beacons for hikers. She wrote a book, Eli's Trail, pouring her pain into pages that exposed the case's flaws and honored her son's memory. She spoke at conferences, her voice a beacon for parents of missing children. Eli taught me to keep going, she said in a 2024 interview, her eyes bright with tears. His light still shines. The Olympic forest had taken her son, but Sarah took back its power, turning a mother's grief into a legacy of hope. Caleb Reed remained silent, his secrets locked away, but Sarah didn't need his words. She had the truth. Eli was loved, and his story would live on. Forks never forgot Eli Brennan. The town erected a memorial at the Lake Crescent trailhead, a small stone with a dinosaur carving, a reminder of the boy who vanished. Sarah walked the trail every June 14th, retracing their last steps, feeling Eli's hand in hers. The forest, once a predator, became a place of peace, where she could hear his laughter in the wind. The mystery was solved, but its scars remained, a testament to a mother's love, unyielding against the darkest odds. Eli's story wasn't just a tragedy, it was a call to fight, to question, to never let a child's light fade. Well, have you ever heard of a case like this? Comment your thoughts. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and catch you in the next one.